Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to start today with a single quote. Now, on the surface, it just sounds like a policy announcement. But, as we're about to see, this one statement is a thread that, when you pull it, unravels a brutal war, the entire global economy, and maybe, just maybe, the end of the world order as we know it.
So, here it is, a stunning announcement from the White House. Look, this isn't some minor adjustment. This is a seismic shift. For decades, the U.S. has been the main security guarantor for Europe. This statement hands that responsibility over. It's a huge deal.
But while diplomats are talking policy in quiet, air-conditioned rooms, the reality on the ground is, well, it's anything but quiet. The front lines are hot, they're brutal. Our sources are painting a pretty dire picture for Ukrainian forces, with the map literally changing in real time. It's a very stark reminder of what's really at stake here.
So you have this massive policy change on one hand, and this incredibly grim reality on the other. The disconnect is jarring, right? It just forces you to ask the real question, why is this happening now? What is the bigger picture that we're all missing?
A shift this big doesn't just happen overnight. To really get it, you have to zoom out. The sources we've analyzed trace the roots of this moment all the way back more than 30 years, to the very end of the Cold War. And this is where it gets really interesting, because to understand this conflict, you have to know that there are two fundamentally different stories about how it even started. The official narrative you hear most often is that it's an unprovoked war of aggression. But the sources we're looking at today argue it was the predictable and, in fact, predicted outcome of 30 years of NATO expanding right up to Russia's borders.
And you can literally watch that argument play out step by step on the timeline. It starts in 1990 with a clear promise. NATO will not expand 1 inch eastward. But just 4 years later, that policy is completely reversed. Then you have strategists openly writing about using NATO expansion as a tool to weaken Russia. According to this view, this wasn't an accident. It was a clear trajectory leading straight to the conflict in 2022.
But that still leaves the question, why did the U.S. go down this road in the first place, and why is it stepping back now? To answer that, you have to look past the politics and follow the money. Because under the surface of all this, there's a tectonic shift happening in the global economy. It all starts with this one frankly staggering number, over $35 trillion. That's the U.S. national debt. It's a number so huge that our sources just call it unsustainable. It means the most powerful nation in the world is also the world's biggest borrower. Now for decades, this mountain of debt didn't really seem to matter. And that's because of what's called the dollar's enormous benefit as the world's reserve currency. Basically, this status allowed the U.S. to fund, well, everything, by just borrowing from everybody else. It was like having a global credit card with absolutely no limit. But what happens when your lenders start to get nervous? Japan is still the biggest foreign creditor, sure, but look at number 2, China. For years now, they've been slowly, quietly backing away, reducing how much U.S. debt they hold. They're looking at that unsustainable number, and they're starting to lower the limit on that credit card. All of this economic instability is creating a global crisis of confidence. The way the world sees the U.S. is changing. It's shifting from being a stable anchor to, well, what one analyst calls a dangerous, powerful rogue nation. And let's be honest, it's pretty hard to lead the world when that's how people are starting to see you.
Okay, so with that as the backdrop, how did the West decide to handle the conflict in Ukraine? Its main weapon wasn't military, it was economic. The goal was to use sanctions to absolutely cripple Russia, but it didn't exactly play out as planned.
In fact, our sources argue that the West's main economic weapon, sanctions, completely backfired. The plan was to crash the Russian economy, right? But when Russia was cut off from the West, it just turned east. It started selling its oil and gas to giants like China and India, and the result, instead of isolating Russia, the sanctions actually helped forge an even more powerful economic partnership.
But listen, this pivot to the east is not some magic bullet. The Russian economy is facing its own serious headwinds. Getting critical imports now costs a lot more. Private businesses are getting skittish about supporting the war effort, and a low investment rate is a real threat to future growth. So yeah, the country is surviving, but our sources are pretty clear it's going to need deep, structural reforms to keep going.
And that brings us right back to where we started. You've got the U.S. stepping back, the old economic order is fracturing. And so Europe is staring down a massive question. What does our security even look like anymore?
Because with the U.S. now playing a supportive role, our sources say the old idea, a full NATO-style military alliance for Ukraine, is basically off the table. It's a non-starter. So if that's not the answer, what could possibly replace it?
Well, the analysis points to two potential paths. The first is Ukrainian neutrality. The thinking here is that being formally unaligned, kind of like Austria, is its own best security guarantee. The second option is something totally new, a formal security arrangement guaranteed by the UN Security Council. And this would be a game changer because it would force all the major powers, the US, China, and Russia, to all sit at the same table to keep the peace.
So, when you put all these pieces together, the policy shifts, the economic pressures, the new alliances, you realize they aren't just isolated events. What we are witnessing is a profound global transformation. It's the end of a unipolar, American-dominated world order and the turbulent, unpredictable birth of something new and multipolar.
So that single statement we started with, that one conflict, they're really just symptoms of this painful, uncertain transition. The unipolar system that has been in place for 80 years is ending, and the ultimate question our sources leave us with is this: as one era ends, is the world even remotely prepared for what comes next?